To our dear Wellness Couch listeners, we are sending you all our love during these unprecedented times.
Now is the time to appreciate what community really is all about. And on the back of our wellness base camps in Geelong and Camden being postponed, we've decided to run a virtual experience that anyone can attend. It's called Crisis to Confidence.
Right now, the world faces 5 major challenges. The first one, fear and anxiety. So Kim Morrison will present on certainty and love.
The second one is social isolation. So Marcus Pearce is going to talk about how to build community during these difficult times.
The third is mental and emotional despair. So Brett Hill will talk about how to develop resilience.
The fourth is financial uncertainty. So Jason Witten will talk about creating financial security.
And the fifth is a challenged immunity. So Cindy O'Meara will share how to boost our immunity during these times.
Crisis to Confidence will be broadcast live on Saturday, April 4. And if you can't make it, you'll receive lifetime access.
To register and for all the details, go to thewellnessbasecamp.com. That's thewellnessbasecamp.com.
Thank you, Wellness Couch Tribe. We love you and send our virtual hugs and kisses.
Welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And if you had joining us live, this is the very first podcast that we are pre-releasing and streaming live on Facebook. So if you are not a patron member, you can go and check out that live recording, because sometimes it's just fun if you're a visual learner.
That's right. Yeah, so you can catch them. You can catch all of our podcasts live if you do join Patreon and access the Patreon Sigmore group. Or perhaps you're just accessing this podcast once we've already released it via all of our podcast streaming, in which case, thanks for listening. Yeah. But this is a really a first for us to be releasing a podcast and streaming it live as we're recording it into Facebook, because the topic tonight or today is one that is really important. We feel that that to release this now it needs to be heard. It needs to be explored, because it is parenting through coronavirus. And it's something that Julie and I have been we haven't even caught up really since all of the shit hit the fan, even in Australia, which was nearly a week ago now.
No.
But it's been...
We had like a rushed conversation this afternoon.
We did. But it's been, I know, it's particularly for our overseas listeners, for our international listeners, it's been, we've got listeners who are in lockdown. We've got, in the US and the UK. Sorry, not in the UK, in Europe. So, there's people who are really... And for all of us, really, it's a whole new world out there, and it's a world we're trying to make sense of, and increasingly day by day looking for more certainty and getting none, I think, is where we're all at.
And navigating an ever increasing rate of change. Like every day, the pace of change accelerates.
Yeah.
And we're not great with change at the best of times, we humans.
We're not.
And the rate at which we're being required to move with change, I think, is unprecedented. So I think that also can trigger a lot of trauma for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of mental health and anxiety conditions completely separate to the virus itself. So,
which is actually what we see with panic buying and hoarding. I mean, we can the Prime Minister of Australia and other ministers have completely blasted that kind of activity. But that activity, comes from a deep-seated, often trauma. Whether it is a trauma epigenetically through war times and needing to hoard in order to feel some level of safety, or simply a newer trauma, which is I have no certainty, but if I can have some certainty around being able to feed my family, then that's something.
Yeah. So actually, I was trying to find a clip today. I got sidetracked as what happens when you go on a YouTube, tunnel. But I was watching Frozen 2 with my youngest today. She's obsessed with it, which is great. It's the only thing she'll watch. Yeah. So it'll buy me at least half an hour. Have you watched it yet?
I haven't watched it.
Oh my God.
Is it on, like, you just buy it to watch
I just bought the DVD. Yeah. Anyway, there's this segment after the whole town's been evacuated for danger reasons, and they're all, struggling with the trauma of that and the panic of what now, and, as they're planning what their next step is. And Olaf, the little snowman, is sitting down with a group of kids, and he's like, the kids are like sticking icicles in around, making patterns on his face, and essentially someone goes, you going okay, Olaf? And he's like, yeah. I call this controlling what you can when nothing's in your control. It was some statement like that. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, that's gold.
Well, it is gold because it's true. I mean, and that also, whether it's panic buying or it's trying to control your children, which is another thing that happens, right? So you're in stress, you're overwhelmed.
Yeah. Pick your control.
Because it's going to come up somewhere. Right, because when you're feeling out of control, you're looking for something to hang on to. You're trying to find some kind of solid ground, and any kind of leadership that we might even be looking to in any country right now, there's not a lot there. And so, okay, well, what can I lead? What can I control? All right, I'll try to control these children. And then increasingly, the more that we try to control them, the more that they're naturally going to put up resistance to control. And then you have, lots of challenge in relationship. So,
all right, so let's wind it back a little bit. I know we've got a couple of questions.
We do.
But I did kind of want to dance around just the issue itself. Now, you are our resident media head, because that is certainly not me. What's your media spin on what you see having happened or progressed or predominant?
Look, it's really, really tricky, because I think that for most of us, nobody really knows. Like, it just feels so surreal that this is even happening, I think. And from my perspective, I think that there's a bunch of different geopolitical reasons why this might be happening, because I think it's more than simply a pandemic. I think that there's other bigger forces that perhaps, whether they're engineering it or whether they're on some level utilising it for political gain or for corporate control gain.
I've heard all number of conspiracy theories, actually.
There's actually so many.
Yes, so many. Yeah.
And I think it's one of those things that we actually won't know about for a long time.
No.
What it is.
No, I agree with that. And actually, I was listening to the vaccine debate. Is it vaccine debate? Vaccine Conversation podcast the other day, because they had a couple of podcasts on coronavirus.
Oh, did they?
Yeah. So I'd sort of binge listened to them, because I do think they have fabulous conversations.
They're really, really well, really knowledgeable, and they have really robust conversations.
Really robust conversations, yeah. So in this conversation, the doctor who's one of the hosts, who's a paediatrician, kind of gives you all of the background information on statistics and talks about coronavirus being a family of viruses that are the coronavirus, of which SARS and I can't remember now, a couple of others were part of, but they couldn't come up for a new name with this one.
So it's COVID, or it's COVID-19 is the particular one, Right.
So he was talking about just the different sort of danger statistics between that and SARS in 2002.
Okay.
And that this particular coronavirus currently has a 2.2% mortality rate, and SARS had a 10% mortality rate in 2002. Quite different. And he was just talking all around that, which I found really interesting. And then the female co-host was doing this kind of fabulous and, yes, polarized spin back to how it's relevant to something like the measles vaccine.
Oh, okay.
So she was saying, you know, we're all over, you know, the measles vaccine that's spread in exactly the same way and blah, blah, blah. And yet we want to stamp that out as opposed. Anyway, it's just an interesting conversation to
well, it is because also because some countries like the UK and Netherlands are choosing a herd immunity approach. So they're choosing to allow the so what they're suggesting is that the really old and the vulnerable self-isolate and that the rest of the community mix in order for everybody to build an immunity to this.
Yeah,
essentially.
So I found this really interesting too because I had this same conversation with I have two close friends involved in as currently Australia's testing and sort of health monitoring.
Yes.
And I was having this conversation with them too, and they too were referring to the fact that what we're putting in place in Australia right now is to reduce the peak incident of infection.
Yeah.
Because if the rate of infection of which it spreads quite quickly rises really quickly, it overwhelms the medical system.
And that's really, I mean, that's when
it becomes more dangerous.
Yes. And that's also where I think our personal responsibilities come in, and that we'll talk about that a little bit later.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I mean, and I certainly understand this, and I talk to you a lot about this in terms of the greater context of how this might fit into the World Health Organization's global vaccine mandates that essentially they're committed to ensuring. There's a statement that they say which is leave nobody behind. So they want everyone vaccinated. So however this pandemic has come about, it certainly serves that global mandate that they have to ensure everybody
the agenda.
Yeah. So that's why we're seeing more pushing for flu vaccine, even though in fact the flu vaccine doesn't actually protect you against COVID-19 at all.
Well, from what I heard, statistically that's 24-ish months away unless they speed that process but
it is a race
don't
now.
Test.
Don't test. And I think there's actually somebody who has been the first guinea pig in the States for an iteration of this COVID-19 vaccine.
Really?
So, and I guess it's that thing, right? So if you throw enough resources at a problem that's a worldwide problem that's bringing down economies across the world, you're going to find ways to mobilize people very quickly, right?
Yeah.
Especially when I think Donald Trump said that he would pay X amount of money for someone to come up with that pretty quickly. So anyway, back to herd immunity. Yes.
So all of the procedures that we have in place right now in Australia are to minimise the peak so that our health system can continue to cope as opposed to being overrun and then mortality and fallout rising. Yeah. So they're trying to really stead that, but under the expectation that we need herd immunity.
Yes.
That ultimately it's not a matter of I'm not going to get it, but I will get it at some point because we need a community which is immune to a virus so that it's not mutating into a super virus.
Yeah.
And that it reduces the rate of spread. And we know with viruses there's always a second wave, and that often the second wave of infection is worse than the first wave. So if everybody doesn't get it in the first wave, it means the second wave peak becomes more overwhelming than the first wave peak.
Which is why they're talking about like the impact being, 6 to 12 months because of those first and second waves.
Of virus spread. So I understand it. I also can see that the government is looking after, it's keeping currently in Australia our schools, shopping centres, public transport, health, emergency services are all still open and functioning.
Yeah.
We're certainly not in household lockdown. So I can see that they're trying to do that as a government to protect the fallout and the economy for Australia, and I really understand that.
And me too, and I think the conversations I've been having with a lot of people too is that there's a lot of people who aren't so concerned about the virus because they feel like they'll be okay. And I get that. And our responsibility is to ensure that we're doing as much as we can to support our own immunity, but also recognise that there's many people who will not be okay. And that's where we take measures, right?
Exactly. Which is the conversation you and I had today. Yeah.
But, it also is disappointing to me that there's so much conversation around washing hands and social isolation, but nothing on what you can do as an individual to support your own immune system. There's really nothing there about, how about you,
food is medicine.
Food is medicine, but that's actually not true if you read mainstream media. So that's unfortunate, I think, because it's actually a really beautiful opportunity for us to, because there is actually a vast population of people who don't have that level of health literacy.
Yeah, health literacy is great wording.
So I think it's a lost opportunity in that regard. Because in fact that would actually help stem the spread as well. If everybody is leveling up their own immune system's capacity, they're therefore, you know, a less attractive host. You know what I mean?
Well, it's reflective of the whole of the health of Mother Earth, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
We are the micro of the macro.
Yes.
So the more that we invest in our own inner health, the more that is automatically reflective in the outer health. Like, I do think that we are an embodiment of and a cycle of. And I love, actually, I was, there's been just so many fabulous memes and you know, championing of community and kindness and outpouring. Like,
and that's where I can see, like, in this is the thing, like, I love looking for pairs of opposites and the law of conservation at play, because that's where I can see that, yes, those like socialization and quarantining and things like that have had enormous impact, but the connection on social media and digitally is enormous, and there's just a really heart-opening outpouring of connection. And also, you know, a lot of people, a lot of more alternative voices are recognizing that this is, you know, is this what had to happen as a wake up call as well that
is generally the conversation in left wing or conscious communities.
However,
is this the wake up call to come home to self and what is most important to self and health and wellness,
and, like, you know, finding your roots, like deepening your roots again to the ground that you walk upon, and asking yourself, is this the direction that I want to take with my life? Because when you're thrust into, when all of your attachments are removed, when all of the perhaps unconscious patterns you have in your life are removed from you, like, it's searingly painful, but also, is it part of your awakening to ask yourself, is this job that I'm going to every day, or is this life that I've chosen for myself what I really truly want, or am I doing it on autopilot? You know, but it's hard, because when you are, you know, perhaps a family that's lost your primary breadwinner's income, or you know, there's just so much uncertainty. I can see how all of this, you know, don't feel the fear, you know, like, rise beyond the fear. How much of that can feel really, really
like a slap in the face.
Like a slap in the face, and really unhelpful, as some of the, you know, and more kind of spiritually bypassing kind of voices can sound really unhelpful.
That is the perfect word,
because
bypass.
We can say this is all perfect and it's unfolding perfectly and the universe knows about a higher plan, but in our human form, when we're struggling, you know, this is a moment to moment struggle for some people, and all of us, right? Because I can feel like the collective pain body in this. I don't think that if you have any level of empathy that you can't not feel that. And in turn, so are our children, and our children are bathing in it, and they're bringing it home to us, and they're bringing it to us to ask us what to do with it in many ways.
Well, I just think the energy is crazy at the moment.
You can feel it.
It's the weirdest, eeriest, anxiety riding energy at the moment. A few of my friends are teachers, and they're like, they don't have a choice but to work.
Totally. And like, my mum's a teacher, and she's just like talking to all her friends and saying that this is like, it's like they've been treated like babysitters.
Yeah.
Because they're just at the front line, and like all of the conversations, none of them are about the children's education. It's about keeping kids in school, because no one can look after them if we take them out.
Yeah.
You know, which I know is a reality, but at the same time, what about these teachers and their health and all the people that they're coming into contact with, and the fact that,
because they can't teach with a mask on.
No, and how effective is that anyway?
Yeah, so I do really feel for them. I do think that's really hard, because even if they would choose to, you know, socially isolate or separate or whatever the case may be to protect, because they're all coming home to babies or children or at-risk people. Or, you know.
And unfortunately, from what I've heard, there's a lot of schools who are just slamming down any resistance from their teachers.
I've heard that too.
It's pretty disgusting.
Yeah.
So, and I can understand that from a leadership point of view, because they are extremely stressed, right? Like, we've got leaderships, you know, from the government down, who are trying to make decisions that are unprecedented and for which there is no script, and for which the losses are unfathomable. Like, if we look at our economy, like Qantas has just like cut 20,000 jobs, you know, and there's airlines that are ground to a halt. And so it's not just the airline staff, it's all of the people who work in the airports, it's the buses that ship them there, it's the whole entertainment industry's been wiped out. You know, and I've like got friends who've got, you know, two parents work in the entertainment industry. What do they do? You know, and they're just waiting to be like, what do I do now? How do I make my rent? How do I pay my mortgage? Like, there's so many question marks, and those are things that have not really been answered quite just yet.
No, they haven't. And I do think that's why the government's trying to keep all of those facilities open.
Yes.
Because what I've heard, I have my next door neighbour has quite a number of friends in Eastern Europe, and they've gone into hardcore lockdown.
Okay.
Like not allowed to leave your house. If you leave your house with another human or with a child in tow, you're fined.
Really? Wow.
Like serious house lockdown.
Okay, because I've heard that they're allowed to leave, like one person's allowed to go to the supermarket or something.
Yeah,
like
one
that.
person on their own. But you cannot take a child with you or walk out of the house. Like kids are in the house in lockdown.
Wow.
Like it's really serious.
Yeah. And then I just think, how do you, unless you're really proactive and conscious and have a sense of what your body and mind needs to be able to handle that.
Well, this is the problem though, isn't it?
There's no conversation
you just stay
about
home
that.
with the kids.
Oh, it's easy. Like done, right? Like
I know.
And a lot of these people live in apartments, so there's no fresh air, there's no open backyard that they can go and feel the grass in.
So that's what I was going to say to you. So their government, I don't know how they're doing it, but is subsidising half of all wages with employers.
Wow.
That's how they're surviving that period of time right now.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what Australia wants to do, which is why it's keeping all of those facilities currently open.
Because Australia doesn't want to go into that bigger deficit.
Yeah.
Yeah. But at what cost as well? I mean,
well, I don't know. I mean, this is the thing,
isn't it? And when we think about this whole, and I was talking to somebody last night at a dance class, I was saying, we were talking about the fact that we've got this whole risk of losses of lives from this virus, but what about the losses to suicide, as a result of enormous job losses or the massive mental health challenges or other diseases that are going to manifest from the stress? Right?
Actually, massive like that. I think I even said to you, and I was certainly saying it to the women in my Embark program last night, I was saying I feel this rise, if I really actually want to sit in it, of absolute anxiety to the point of sickness for what I perceive will be the increase in domestic abuse, violence and childhood abuse. Yeah. So if you're a social worker or you work with women who either are in traumatic experiences or have themselves experienced trauma or childhood abuse, if you work in that industry like I do, you know what happens behind closed doors. And the less out there we are, the more isolated we are, the more heightened and pressure-packed an environment is, the more cataclysmic and catastrophic the trauma becomes.
And this is actually why I'm quietly celebrating the fact that the AFL is still going ahead.
Yeah, I heard so many debates about that.
But I actually think it's really important, and that will create a healthy outlet for the masculine who needs somewhere to put their energy, who needs some kind of focus that's not in the four walls or with their own stress, because as we know, sport is a great outlet, and a fundamental outlet for many, many men. And for so much of it has been cancelled. And so I think that we can find the blessing in the fact that that's going ahead from a health point of view, essentially from a relationship health point of view, from a mental health point of view. And that's where I think we need to open our minds to where we're getting polarized with this about what should and shouldn't happen, because for every...
What is health?
Well, what is health, right? Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And so it's so much more than what vitamins you have to take to get through this, which is everywhere.
Or even the concept of being socially responsible. I know we're going to have that conversation about our choices around it, but even that, in the context of trauma and abuse, is it even a relevant conversation?
Yeah, exactly. Because if you're keeping your kids home, or if you're going into isolation and you can't even handle yourself, let alone parent, is that really a healthful choice for anybody? And what are the flow-on ramifications of that to make that choice? And, especially if you're making that choice from a should, as opposed to a grounded, this is what I'm actively choosing place, when you have a choice, because obviously in some countries you don't. In Australia, we do still have a choice about whether we choose to socially isolate. And I think it's important for us to ask ourselves if it's a congruent choice or if we're just conforming to what we feel like we should do.
Yeah.
Because there are many, many different ways in which we could approach this, and everyone, whatever choice you make, will have an opinion about it. So that's why it's really important to get clear.
Heightened topics tend to do that.
Yeah, don't they?
Yeah.
And I mean, like, in fact, like I'm in a group with a bunch of other students of Dr. John D. Martini, who I would actually love to like talk to right now about all of this, because I think it'd be fascinating. But there's people in there who are in Mexico, and apparently the Mexico president is like, this is all a beat up, just ignore it. Like they had a Guns N' Roses concert there with 100,000 people.
Really?
Nothing, no concern, nothing's happening in Mexico. Life as usual.
That's fascinating,
isn't it? And this is the fact that because the world has to have a complementary opposite, right? Like it's always in conservation. And so we could say, oh no, then this coronavirus will get down there and will run rampant. But will it? We don't know that. We might apply our modelling and say yes, it's going to, or it doesn't.
It's a different psychology and a different vibration.
And then I also look at like the vibration of fear and the fact that how much do we keep telling ourselves the numbers are going to grow, and how much do we keep waiting to get these symptoms? That on some level are we vibrationally aligning with manifesting those as well, right? Because there's power in what we give our thoughts to. So I think that that's important too, to be considering, where am I at today? Where am I at with this thing that I'm faced with, and what am I going to choose to take forward?
What am I going to choose? Because the point is the government is looking after I'm talking about Australia only, the economy and how to get Australia in the best way possible through that. Financially and economically. They are not here to tell you what the best thing to do with your individual family's health and choices is.
No, they're not. And that's where the wonderful world of the internet means that you can find that information and find what you need to make those choices for yourself, and to do the research that you feel is appropriate to be able to figure that out, right? Because I don't think it's black and white. I don't think anything's black and white.
No, I don't think anything's black and white either. And I think you can only do the right next thing for you, right? You can only do the right thing in the right time with the amount of information that you have, and that's the best you can ever do in any given moment.
That's right.
Hindsight is a wonderful thing, but we're always looking backwards with a different filter to what we had in the moment. So it's kind of a moot point as well. So I think you can only ever do the best that you can do in a way that it feels most aligned and congruent. And I think the more solid you feel and the more at home with your choices you feel, then I just think you don't have to second guess yourself. So in the context of social distancing, though, let's have talk about that. So just as a side note, my bloody husband's license plates from his car got swiped last night.
Did they?
So people are doing dodgy shit right now.
Dealing with their anxiety and like...
I don't know what the fuck.
I don't know.
So we had the police over today. And so the police out. The first thing he does is shake her hands. And I'm like, are we still doing that?
Well, it depends, right?
Are you supposed to be wearing... I was asked, are you supposed to be wearing a mask?
Did you say that to him?
Yeah, I did. And he laughed and went, oh, yeah. I probably should have asked you questions first. And then he took a step back and goes, we're now 1.5 meters apart and I need to ask you these questions. And I was just like, oh, so we're still human.
Yeah. Although it was like this press conference that I saw where this woman was talking about how important it was. You can't touch your face, and it's really, really important because we don't even realize how much you're touching.
Oh God,
your face.
I know. At the moment, I'm like, oh my God,
anyway,
stop touching your face.
Just the parameters are to make sure you're washing your hands and never touching your face. And she licks her finger. As part of a mannerism because she was turning a page, right? Like we're human, right? We're human. And I think that this is also the level of lightness and compassion that we need to bring to other people when we're feeling deeply triggered and shooting on them, right? Like shooting on other people for not conforming is, because it's happening everywhere. It's happening in my school group about people who should be self-isolating. And I get where there's pain and fear, for those people who have got immunocompromised family.
Okay, so this is the conversation that we just need to slow down and have.
Let's have that conversation.
Let's slow that down.
Yes.
So high-risk people to me are people over the age of 65, really young babies, so under the age of 1. Anyone who's immunocompromised in any way. So they have long-term chronic health conditions of any sort, I would say, but also specifically around the area of any breathing apparatus, so lungs, bronchioles, sinus, anyone who I think could potentially be immunocompromised and going through something like chemotherapy or cancer currently. What else? I can't even think right now. My mind's gone.
Well, that's essentially it, isn't it? Anybody who's
pregnant.
And pregnant, yes.
Yeah, so it's not the virus itself, because I've certainly read studies recently that say the virus itself is not detected in amniotic fluid or in umbilical blood, cord blood, but the issue is the fever.
The fever, yeah, that's right. And in fact, a friend of mine has been told, or a friend of hers is 12 weeks pregnant, and her midwife has said you need to self-isolate for 12 weeks because the risk of fever for you having previously miscarried is too high.
Yeah, exactly. So the level of social and self-responsibility is not to us but to those people, those members of our community that we would like to probably in many ways separate ourselves from and just go, well, I'm fine, my family's fine, which is totally me. Like, I'm looking at going, and I had the conversation with my kids continuously, I'm not worried about any of us getting sick. Like, I'm really not. I think it's a flu virus that, yes, while it will be awful, we are strong, healthy, we have a cupboard full of all of the things that I need to treat anyone. We're going to be fine. Yeah. We're going to be fine.
That's right.
But my mum is a high-risk person. We have contact with members of the community who are high-risk people. And I think that it's socially irresponsible for me to have my children, who in all likelihood have been at school up until today, more contact with community, and me included as well. We're out and about still, kids are still playing together. We can certainly be carriers without ourselves being infected. We could already be infected, and in fact is the most infectious phase before you are actually symptomatic. So you could be automatically transmitting the virus before you're even aware that you're sick to begin with. And the level of self-responsibility that I feel, if it was one of us who essentially got my mum sick and potentially could be fatal for her, I couldn't live with it.
Yeah.
I couldn't live with it. So I rang her today and had a really serious conversation with her about, hers, because she can be quite kind of like, I'm, young and fit and healthy and I'm going to be fine. And I really had the conversation with her and like, you really need to consider the fact that you are a high risk person. Yeah, I know you're good, you're healthy. But, and because of that, I choose not to have my children around you at the moment because I can't handle the level of risk and responsibility that I put you in. Yeah. And I cannot handle that burden of if it were me that ended up transmitting to you, and it can be fatal for you. Not for me. Yeah. But it could be for you. And I just can't live with it. So I had that really hard conversation with her today, and she was like, yeah, I really understand that. I get it. Yes, I'm being careful, blah, blah, blah. She then later sent me a photo of her out walking with her mask on. Okay, good. We're getting it. Yeah. But she goes, but she lives on, and the other point is high risk, she lives on her own. So if she had any breathing difficulties or got into distress, could she even get somewhere that could help her? Like, I do think living on your own is high risk too.
That's it. And also because, like, you don't really want to just get yourself in hospital for any reason over the next 6 months if you can avoid it.
Right. And the other point is, as I said to my kids today too, I also, I don't think for us it's a matter of we're going to avoid getting sick. I think it's a matter of we will probably get the virus because that's part of herd immunity and it will be fine. Yeah. But as much as is humanly possible, we would like to choose when that happens or that we delay that so that there's not such a huge spike, so that if we need the hospital system, it is available to us
and rather than
and it's resourced rather than being swept up in the great increase and then no one can help us in that peak increase. So I was saying to my kids today, that's why we're making certain choices now about just delaying the spread as much as we can influence that. Yeah.
And you never know, but it feels like if that feels like the right choice and we're a new resource to make that choice.
Yeah. And this is the other thing, right? Like, I get that there's certain people that do not have the luxury that I have. I work from home. There's no reason that my kids can't be at home, homeschooled by me.
And that's similarly led me to the same choice.
Like, there's no reason. Yeah. If our livelihood depended on me working and therefore I needed my children in care to be able to do that, I totally get it. But mine doesn't. So I can make a socially responsible decision to be part of the wave that reduces the peak.
Yes.
So that's the decision that we have collectively as a family made today. So I just think it's also less about self and more about your awareness around children are just pretty, dirty in general. Yeah. Like if anyone's going to get sick, it's going to be your kids.
And it's by design because they need to build a strong immune system so they get sick often.
Yeah.
And so I think that we also see that as a function of health.
I do, but then you need to separate your children from elderly people
and so that's
high-risk people.
Yeah, and so that's a conversation that I've been having with my mum, who is also doing shopping for my 91-year-old grandfather. And so I'm saying to her, because she's obviously looking after my kids, every now and again, once a week sometimes, and I said to her, look, I'm concerned about potentially you as a transference if you are coming into contact with him. And she was really conscious of that and was saying that, in fact, she's actually not even seeing him. She's kind of dropping the stuff off, and that they're figuring out around what the family, what that looks like, so that there's minimal, because he lives on his own, that there's minimal contact from people who are likely to be, touching around, the more kid kind of younger people focused, where in fact I was looking at some data and the highest carriers apparently are 20 to 29-year-olds. So that's why the push is on closing universities or getting university students out of unis.
That's so interesting.
Because they are so asymptomatic.
Well, they certainly seem to be the most well-resourced education, I don't want to say department, but it's not area at the moment, because certainly that flow-on has not happened. That level of sophisticated organisation is not apparent in high schools and primary schools.
So it's interesting, in Australia we see some private schools closing or electing to close.
Yeah, but I've heard they have to reopen again on Monday.
Really?
Yeah, Nick and I were having that conversation last night.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's and then there's also more of them that are setting up for a potential full closure of term 2. So term 2 may be delivered fully online for some schools, and the Department of Education for public schools is still really holding back on any kind of decision there, but there's a lot of preparation going on in the background for that.
Look, the same thing with I'm in the Catholic education system, same thing there. In fact, I was speaking to another mum this morning who's another high school teacher, and she's like, oh my God, I'm getting these emails daily from, as people decide to self-isolate and stay home. Can you send me work? What do I need? And she's like, I can't.
I can't do that. Exactly.
I can't do that because we're educating. All of our resources, my time, my energy is still in the classroom. I can't then do a second workload online when we're not facilitated
and
for that.
And that's what I would say too, is that I would not expect that of a teacher.
No.
To be giving my child work outside.
No.
Like if we're choosing to pull him out, then we're choosing to take on the responsibility of continuing what we can at home.
Yes.
And I mean, I tend to take more of an unschooling approach anyway, but that it will be led by what I know he's been working on and trying to fit that into his highest values, and we'll continue learning in that process. But I absolutely would not expect a teacher to have to design something for my child if I'm choosing to pull them out.
Yeah, well, that's essentially the email I sent my kids' teachers tonight. Was I'm in no way trying to add to your workload. I'm quite happy and to homeschool. I mean, I'm not going to lie, it's like slightly part of my fantasy life.
Yeah, me too. I was like, is this like my kind of closet dream coming true?
Sorry,
because I'm already excited about all of these women who are never going to home birth and are now home birthing.
Yeah. Oh my God, your post was epic. I loved it.
Could this be permission to homeschool, right? But that's a little bit of a side note. But because my son's often always said, why can't I do school at home?
Oh, there's very little boundaries here. So when we really talked about the fact that out there's too dangerous and everyone needs to be in here, there was nothing that was really going to come, there's nothing coming from here that's no, we shouldn't do that.
If we're really honest.
If I'm really honest.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to actually plunge into the challenge of homeschooling.
Yeah.
Because obviously you and I have been born and bred into that community.
We have,
of unschooling and homeschooling since the day that we had our children.
Yeah.
So whilst we chose to move through schooling systems, we still very much in preschool have tapped into all of the resources of unschooling and continue to still have philosophies around child education and scaffolding learning.
And very much child-led,
that are outside mainstream education systems. So I had the chat to my kids tonight about it, and I'm like, yeah, you know, this will mean that we're going to look at our home and household as if it were, you know, a working farm. And so each morning we're going to look at the things that sustainably need to be facilitated throughout the day, inside and outside. And when we look at each of those things, then we're going to look at what is the learning in them.
So great.
Oh, I'm so excited. So it might be, you know, we've got to clean the chicken coop. So you guys, you can do, we can research about diatomaceous earth, or we can research about, you know, chicken infestations and all of the different disease states they can get and how they manifest in their systems biologically, what the disease progression is. You know, like I'm going, we can do all of these things. My kids are like, oh, because I love science and biology. And they're like, oh, can we make elephant toothpaste? And I'm like, well, only if we can come up with some chemical constructs around what we're actually doing. You know? And then Jade's like, oh, can we get dry ice? And so we're having all this. And Nick's like, no, we're not getting dry ice. I just read the other day that someone decided to put dry ice in their pool for a party, and then kids jumped in and 3 of them died.
No.
Because they wanted to get that smoky effect, you know, on the pool. But whatever the chemical component is reacted with the chlorine and has resulted in the death of 3 kids, 3 teenagers.
Right.
So I was saying, you know, my teenagers were like, really? And I'm like, Keith, that's your research assignment tomorrow.
Yes.
Tell me about that chemical reaction.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at what is the function in our life where for the first time they get to be fully invested in all of the things that I love, and I get to teach them all of the things that I love. And, you know, food technology, and talking about the chemical reactions that make a cake, and, you know, self-sustainability and moving towards what does biodynamics look like. And, you know, we've currently got some scale on our zucchini. So let's talk about why that's there and what solutions would be to it. And like schooling in a completely different paradigm that brings them home.
Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, and it really is that invitation to connect with what's put you here in the first place, right? Yeah. Because as soon as we lose, and I was saying this to my husband, like, I think this can remind so many people, or, you know, for the first time, perhaps ask them to think about where their food's coming from.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
The things that they've completely taken for granted that just happen to arrive on a shelf. What's the story of that? Like, how did that get there? Who are all of the people who brought that to me? And what an immense privilege I have to be able to access that. You know, and
the trouble is we're so privileged that we have no resilience left.
Yeah, it's true. And this is also where I think the profound nature of getting back into permaculture principles and learning about that and understanding the interconnectedness of life, and that how we are so intimately connected even if we don't realize it, and how this is a really stark at times reminder of that. Like, I think I think on the whole it's a beautiful invitation, but it's delivered with a shit ton of pain for a lot of people.
And suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple of questions here.
Yeah.
What have we got? Yeah. So we've got something here for the people who are listening to the podcast. We've also got comments happening on our Facebook Live. What's Stace saying?
What a treat to see you two. Thanks, Stace. That's lovely.
This week I have 2 kiddos, 2 and 5, out with a terrible vomiting bug. School has been closed for 2 weeks after a major fire, and COVID-19 all over the news. I'm a nurse, and COVID-19 means I'll likely work more and not less. I'm a single mum and usually really present and okay, but I'm feeling slightly overwhelmed after trying to get basics for the here and now against the COVID-19 quarantine prep. It's stressful.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. And also, I mean, in other parts of the world, and I even hear in other states of Australia, it's not so bad. For some reason in Victoria, we've gone completely freaking crazy.
Yeah.
And everyone's hoarding food. And so there's nothing in the supermarkets.
And then that's what I find heartbreaking is, you know, you've got people who might only have just enough money for their weekly shop, or the elderly people.
That they don't even have the option of a bulk shop.
Yeah, you know, and so they're going there really hoping for that one thing with just enough money for that one thing, and it's gone because someone else has got 10. You know, like, and that's what I find really heartbreaking.
Yeah, I find that really heartbreaking.
Alexandra says that's a great thing to point out. You can be part of the wave that reduces the peak, and you can acknowledge that not all can do that, but that there are those of us that can. So if we can, we probably should.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's sort of where we
That's
landed.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
And that's, I've been chatting with a number of friends about, about that, about I feel this now sense that I can
just be part of that, without it needing to mean anything about you or anything about me, and without it needing to be like lockdown. Now I'm in my house for the next, I'm just saying I can be part of that and mindful of reducing the exposure of my children to people that are at risk.
Yes. Yeah. Olga says, so privileged that we have no resiliency left. Yes. Had this conversation with our family who immigrated from poverty and their view. Yeah. And, like I'm trying to set up a FaceTime with my pop who's 91, because he was explaining to my mum his experience of living through the Great Depression and the fact that their family.
Oh God, please record that.
I know. Well, I'm going to, because it's fascinating. Yeah. But he was saying that their family, they moved out of their house in the dead of night, and because it was so shameful to have lost your house. So they moved house and lived in someone's garage. He must have been really little. But yeah, I mean, obviously, and this is also what I want people to remember with the panic buying and with the hoarding and with the anxiety, that there are elderly people or even children of elderly people who are tapped into that, that core trauma that doesn't leave your body in a hurry, and that if there's been no work done on it, this is tapping them straight back. And so I get the government wants to be all hardline about people buying up, but to like slap their hand without giving them an understanding of why they might be behaving in that way, and of us having a level of compassion to help them regulate their own nervous system through something that's obviously deeply triggering, it's just a Band-Aid. And all it does is gives more and more people who don't understand permission to hate on these people, which I don't think is helpful either. It creates more separation when what we really need is more connectedness and more ability to try to put ourselves in other people's shoes.
That's 100%. Love will make this world go around. And if, we're not consciously choosing that, I don't know what the lesson out of this can be.
I think it's moment to moment. Like I put a Facebook post like saying, wherever you are, be the soul of that place. Like try to hold the space of that place, but also make it okay when you can't, because there's so many of us, and because we are always being set up by the people around us to feel what they feel, the heightened planetary anxiety now must be through the roof. Like if you could measure that, which I'm sure you can, the measurement of collective pain and anxiety right now would be high. And yes, I know it's going to be balanced in some way, but we're all plugging into each other's level of stress here. And so it's not about trying to chase calm, and it's not about spiritually bypassing and focusing on some other fantasy place where we're not here right now. I think it's also being honest and saying, even to our kids, look, I'm feeling really scared right now, and make it okay to feel that.
Yeah.
Because they feel it anyway.
You're in a human body for a reason, so there's no point trying to deny that.
Yeah. And talk to your partner like every day about how each of you are going, because we all have like the weight of the world on our shoulders right now and what we're trying to carry, and we're all future thinking and wondering how we're going to navigate this. And, it's really big, and I think that we need to really try to open ourselves up and open our hearts as much as we can, and notice when we're hitting edges. Like notice them and work with them. And I think that that's particularly important when we are choosing to self-isolate or stay home as much as possible is preventative measures to regulate your nervous system. So, it looks like dance parties. It looks like, movement activities. It looks like going out for regular walks when you can. It's lying on the grass. It's getting some sun. It's those activities not when you get to the hair pulling your own hair out point. It's preventative maintenance for everybody in the family. And where you see your child, perhaps doing things that you find really challenging or moving in difficult ways, try to ask yourself what the function of this is, because children are always trying to regulate. And the things that we might find really hard, like for instance, my son got super angry at me after school and was throwing stuff at me, and I'm thinking, right, there's lots of stuff here.
Well, that's, I think, what I didn't say before was that my friends that are teachers are like, oh my God, the classrooms at the moment, like kids are like pinging.
Yeah.
And it only takes the tiniest thing
to set them off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did wonder that. I was trying to get that from my son. Like, I was like, what's school like at the moment?
Yeah, I think just kids are feeling the burn of what is probably not being said or explained to them.
That's right. You know,
or a space for them to actually regulate and come back down.
Totally. And, you know, if you might feel connected to your kids, they're also playing in the playground with kids whose parents are maybe like, you know, going through hell right now. And so your kid is meeting that kid on the playground and they're feeling that child and they don't know what it is and they're bringing it home and then really, really, really not sure what's going on. And so it is also trying to cultivate, you know, a capacity in your own body to hold more space for that and to move beyond behaviorist ideals or, you know, like self-righteous family values about we don't do this in this house, to look at the function of what's coming home here and what do I need to help my child move through and what boundaries can I create to keep the other siblings safe while we work with this, because it needs to move somewhere and they are looking for us to regulate them, but often we can't. Like if we're stressed, if you're really stressed, you're not going to be a great external regulator for your child. And that's okay. I don't think we have to be perfect right now. And I think,
well, I do think it's also worth looking at kids' behaviours for where they themselves are trying to purposefully regulate as best as their behaviour or ability to know can at the moment. Like I have been really taking the step of observing, particularly my 2-year-old. And it is extraordinary to me how with this rise in anxiety, she has also amped up her ability to self-regulate.
Isn't that cool?
It's so fascinating to me. So, you know, this 2-year-old who would always hang at my feet, all of a sudden I'm finding these pockets where I'm like, where the heck did she just go? And normally that would mean like trouble. You know, she's gone into the sprinkles and they're all over the floor or she's scaled something.
She's drawn on a wall.
Who knows?
Yeah, something like that.
So I'm used to kind of having this panic moment of, holy shit, I don't know where she is, you know. And I've had a couple of those in the last few days, only to find that she's shut her bedroom door, or her sister's room actually. She's shut the room to her sister's bedroom and she's made herself a cubby with all of her babies in the bed and she's just talking to them.
That's so sweet.
Oh, and I just think, this is your regulation. So this is not the time for me to insert myself in your play. This is not the time for me to walk past and, oh, you playing with your babies and snap her out of that. This is not the time for me to insert myself. This is the time for me to go, oh, I can hear that she's doing that. Cool. I'm going to respectfully leave her because she's sorting herself. She doesn't need me to do it or to change it. What this is perfect for her. And then she comes out happy. When she's ready, she comes out of her bubble and she's good to go.
So beautiful.
So beautiful. And also because I expect those same levels of respect from my children for me when I'm in creative flow. This is part of that mutual respect. So she's doing that and then she's wanting to jump on the trampoline and she's wanting to take her clothes off all of the time at the moment.
My daughter's doing that too. And lots of baths.
Showers.
Baths. And, you know, baths are actually a really effective regulation tool for ourselves as well. So if you have a bath at home, like have a bath, you know, because there's something beautiful about the immersion in water that gives us that just regulation, right?
Totally. And drawing, so sort of chalk on the pavement and, you know, just the backwards and forwards motion of chalk on the pavement. Or she'll happily play around in the car while I just sit on the ground, you know, outside the car in the driveway and, you know, do some work, whatever. So I do think it's really worth seeing how your children are always trying to regulate. Hair brushing has become really big in my house in the last like 4 days or so.
That's cool.
Not because I've fostered it, but I just think this is part of the collective conscious, right? So all of my girls now are like, I'll even post a couple of videos because it's really been fascinating me. Just like
the rhythmic, like
brushing each other's hair. Even tonight at story time, just before you got here, I was sitting on the bed reading stories to the 2 younger girls. The 2-year-old gave up. She wanted a story, but her older sister had just jumped out of the shower. So she sits there and she's just happy just to brush her older sister's hair while I'm just reading stories in the background to the other. And I just thought, this is genius.
So good. I love when you can sit in that place of curiosity because it is, whatever they're doing, it's functional for them. And I think so, as adults, we can so quickly, particularly when, you know, you're in early childhood environments and there's so much about teaching and directing the child that you can miss
how they self-direct.
And how they're actually, whatever they're doing is purposeful for them, even if we don't understand it. And so to give them a level of respect that we would like can give them more permission to be in that space and continue to cultivate that connection to self, which is what they're doing when they're in that place. essentially.
Yeah.
And also when your kids seem fine, also don't leave it either. Like, so my son, it's his birthday on Saturday.
Oh, when they seem fine.
Fine, you know. Yeah. So it's his birthday on Saturday, and so obviously there's so much having to change for that. So his grandparents are not coming down. I'm still not sure if we're going to go out. He had his heart set on going to the Legoland, which we're just not going to go to.
Yeah.
And so he seems to have just taken it in his stride.
Really?
Unusually so. And so I'm thinking there's something, and I think part of it is what's been playing out, you know, like all the anger and the aggression, and so it's not immediately coming out like when he learns about these changes, but it's coming out in this disordered way as he's trying to, you know, compute it, I suppose. And so knowing that even if we can't understand why they might be lashing out or having a hard time, that they are working through their own stuff, and to as much as we possibly can ask the question of, you know, what could be here, and just give them room to move it.
Yeah, I totally think that too. But it does take a level of self-health to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's true.
I think this is a time like no other where there is radical responsibility on you if you are the primary caregiver for your own health and well-being.
Yes.
And self-care beyond the fucking manicure.
Yeah.
Please.
And that's a really good point, because, you know, this for me comes as a result of like half-hourly connection to self. Like,
right.
Like,
and I have been exhausted this week, and I keep going to myself, I don't know why I'm so tired, but I'm so tired.
Yeah.
All I want to do is just lie down. Yeah.
Yeah. Deep
Which
rest.
is just so that. So I've been finding these pockets just to lie down. But I do think this is the time where we have the space to ask, okay, I've got this extra time. We're home for more time. There's no activities. There's no thing outside of us right now. What do I want to upskill on, learn on, read what I never read before, listen to what I've never listened to before, try out and experiment with what I never have allowed myself because we're too busy before.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, I do think this is the time for the rising of all of those levels of self-care, self-awareness, self-knowledge that you've never given yourself before. I do think that this is a beautiful opportunity and opening for just that. I also do think that if you are having relationship difficulties or parenting difficulties right now, I don't think that they're out of the blue.
Yeah.
I think often what happens is that
they become amplified.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't ever think that it's come out of nowhere. I just think we can busy away probably what was already there as a form of numbing. And it takes a heightened experience in which for that to heighten with it, for us to pay attention to it. So I do think this is also a time to radically nourish and work on your relationship and potentially your parenting in a way that you never have before, because if you can do it now, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, that's really true.
Some really heavy rain.
A lot of rain.
So I feel a massive responsibility for that as well.
A couple more comments from our Facebook listeners. So Dr. Sophie Brock says, 100% Bridget, authoritarian tones and power over us shames us in the same way as it does with our kids. Yeah, so that's in reference to the government trying to shame the people who are hoarding. Tara's saying, we've been isolated all of this week as the kids were unwell anyway, and I'm considering continuing to isolate next week and then going to spend time with my parents' holidays.
In the holidays.
I think if we isolate, I might actually be useful in deterring them from going out and taking their risks seriously for a few weeks and then getting them to isolate when we leave. Difficult decisions in how to care best for those in our community. Yeah, they are difficult decisions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Sandy's a teacher, absolutely noticing that the kids are pinging at work.
Yeah, it's hard.
Rachel's saying, my 3-year-old is really off at the moment. We've had a few weeks of social isolation due to normal sickness. He hasn't had a play with any other kids for like 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Massive meltdowns over wanting more food, but he is also very hugging and kissing. So he's looking for connection, isn't he? Tara, I love hearing that about Gwen. Also notice dysregulation in my kids, but also much greater cooperative play as they rely on each other much more and use imaginary play to release and regulate in a new way. And I think that's it's actually a lovely time to kind of cultivate curiosity between the ways in which your children naturally rupture and repair too, because we can have our own ideals about what that should look like, but when they're also in closer quarters, there's something really powerful about their natural ebb and flow through that I think that can be humbling. I certainly find it humbling when I have these certain ideas about how I might like them to talk to each other, and then I see the ways in which they do it, and it's quite beautiful in their own way.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Also, my kids, when they have an argument with each other or they get frustrated with each other, often one of them will then say something funny and they'll connect through humour. You know, like, and then they're like best friends again. So they have that little pattern going on, which I think is pretty funny. So
it is pretty much. Did we have questions that originally?
We did have a couple of a question or two on Instagram. Let me just bring that one up.
And if you're watching live and you've got any questions,
any more questions,
please just type them in.
Where is it here? No, it's not there. Excuse me, everybody, while I just get this happening.
Okay.
I can't remember which one it was on. Maybe it was. I've lost it. I don't know. We may have already answered it. I think it was in the context of our different views on kind of what this all is, and
yeah,
I think we've kind of answered that at the beginning. On what this COVID-19...
It was a big conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So consequently, we have decided that next month in Soul Driven Motherhood, we will dedicate solely to a homeschooling month. So we will be sharing throughout socials and certainly much more deeply in Soul Driven Motherhood all of the activities that we're choosing to do with our own children. But we're also looking to interview experts, find resources so that if you too are social distancing, that you have options and things to consider and a place to ask questions and have them answered. And we really want to continue that platform to be enormously supportive as everyone navigates this really difficult time, that there's a place to put all of that dysfunction and find the function and connection within that.
And really immerse in a community of, you know, women who have similar values, right? Who really want to use this time to be nourishing and not just something to grit our teeth through, to really find some groundedness.
It is. Sorry, Kerry's just said, my eldest is trying to hold on to the time schedule of school. How can I help her let go and just go with the flow? I think that's her value versus your value. So you've clearly got a value on flow and she's got one on structure. She probably has a hypersensitive or anxious personality type. She probably needs control at a time when she feels a lack of control. So in my opinion, the homeschooling would be, how does she set the schedule?
Yeah, or you can look up deschooling. It depends how long you think you're going to do it for, because there's people who come out of schooling systems and try to deschool their kids essentially to let them let go of that structure. But it does depend on the child and whether that's going to suit that child.
I just see it as really functional too. Like, I don't think the epitome of function is to let go of all schedules.
Of all structure and all schedules. And I actually think that during this time we do need to keep them to some level of routine, because like the brain loves routine. Like we like to know what comes next. And in fact, the reason why
particularly if you have a child who is anxious, to be able to foresee the structure of their day allows them to move into flow.
Yes.
If they're continuously spending all of this energy chewing up, what's happening next? Where am I going to be? Like, what am I doing? What's my game plan? How am I minimizing all of the perceived dangers because I have no idea exactly where I'm supposed to be? Like, fuck.
That's exhausting.
That's not flow.
Yeah. Yeah. It's more anxiety.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just think there's absolutely room for flow in structure. Of course, the structure doesn't have to stay as the structure, because you might find that there's an activity that you just want to go longer because it was delicious. Cool. That's just what happens. But here's a vague rhythm or flow. I know I was speaking to my daughter's grade 6 teacher actually from last year, and she was saying there's so many resources online now as examples of school structures for home.
Yeah.
So it would look like a bit of a play here, and you might go out in the garden here, and she said there's so many like timetable ideas on how to do it. So I just think there's a heck ton of resources, but I wouldn't also be scared of the structure that she's wanting to hold on to at a time where there's no certainty for her.
Yeah.
I don't see that as dysfunctional. I see that as something that I can work with as we maneuver the safety in it looking different. You know, I would even take the role of letting her direct that education. Okay, so you want to do maths from 9 to 10 and then art from 10 to 11. Cool, okay.
Yeah.
Let's have this vague structure, and then each day we can talk about what we might choose to do in those times. But if we have a vague structure, we know that there's a sense of rhythm in our day, as opposed to, you know what it's like. All of a sudden you're, you know, sucked in a vortex of social media and, oh, whoops, it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and no one's out of their jammies or whatever. So, you know, I am a big proponent of flow and structure, and I think actually having my kids home, I will have to be more structured because largely my days are completely unstructured. Once I drop everybody off before I pick them up, that 6 hours is like just mine to do whatever the fuck I want to do with. Whereas having
around
my kids,
a toddler.
Yeah, but still, it's not really structured.
Yeah,
it's like not really at all. So having my kids home, I actually remember when my eldest two were little, I was really way more into homeschooling, not so much unschooling. I had sort of been immersed in different playgroups and structures within that and didn't find that it was really me. I much preferred the homeschooling community or the co-op schooling community. So I probably attached their structure. So I remember literally structuring my days, particularly when they felt endless, I always knew, okay, so we're having breakfast by this time so that by 9 o'clock I've set up an art activity, and by 10 o'clock we're all cleaning it up together, and then we have a snack, and then we move into going to the park. And then actually having that rhythm and accountability felt really purposeful and beautiful for me. And it meant that we always had a rhythm and a flow. And
they do thrive on it. And in fact, because my daughter's in Steiner Kinder, and it's just such a, they feel really held by a really clear rhythm. Like children really do. And I think probably we would too if we created that for ourselves, you know, created that sense of this moves into this, which, you know, and then almost that kind of like in and out breath of moving through your day.
It is an in and out breath. Yeah. But to fully experience the release of the out breath, you've kind of got to have the in breath. So I think structure can be really beautiful. I don't think that structure has to mean rigidity or even that it's forever. So, you know, if you're in STM, Kerry, I'd probably pull that apart a little bit more. But yeah, I would roll with her desire to be a teacher in that space, and I would take the role of the student.
Olga says, thanks to you ladies. Months ago, I read The Brave Learner and it will be invaluable for being home with the kids. You know, I was just thinking about that book today and I'm going to pick it up again because it's going to be an awesome resource. Cool.
So I think we're going to wrap up.
I think we are. Yes, we've actually got a live to deliver in our Suburban Motherhood group right now, so we better skedaddle.
Yes. Thank you for tuning in.
Yeah,
we really
thanks
appreciate
everyone.
it. We do hope you got something out of our conversation and our personal experiences as today at this point in time, because of course it's
changing day by day, right?
As the crisis is evolving and at a rapid rate, so might our opinions and decisions too.
Yeah.
So to have a level of structure allows us to feel a sense of flow, right? But knowing that container might shift.
Yeah, absolutely.
So thank you for joining us. You can find us on nourishingthemother.com.au, Nourishing the Mother, Facebook, Instagram, and I'm going to say Pinterest, because as we move into our homeschooling month, you can bet your bottom dollar I'm going to be Pinteresting the shit out of it, because I love Pinterest.
Yes, and Pinterest, and all the homeschoolers are on Pinterest.
Yeah, I'm mad for it. I don't ever do a project without checking Pinterest first.
It's a treasure trove.
It is. So to connect with you, Bridget.
SuburbanSandcastles.com. Although because we're event-based, there are no events coming up. Yeah, which just kind of sucks. So
it does super suck.
Connect with you, Julie.
Is thepleasurenutritionist.com. And if you are interested, Monday the 23rd, I do start a 5-day course. It's only $55 on relationship. So just really focusing on intimacy. It is based more around sexuality, but
it can be the beautiful gateway to deeper intimacy.
Right.
Yes.
So you can check that out at thepleasurenutritionist.com or social media.
Check us out at nourishingthemother.com.au. Did you?
But you can say it again.
Oh, cool. Just in case you needed to that twice. And remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey. And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast.
We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/TheWellnessCouch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives. Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.